Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some r/Tales from Retail. This is a fun subreddit that I've been looking forward to covering, but it's not that active, so I figured I could do maybe a one-shot for this one and have some fun. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Link Castle. You're not selling to me because I stole? No, that's not correct at all. So I work in a store that has a lot of thefts. Calling security is never an option because they take around 10 minutes to arrive. Even when there was a fight at the registers that ended up requiring the police and multiple ambulances. Because of this, people get away with a lot of things, to the point there's a reoccurring customer who's stolen more than he's ever bought. This isn't that customer. But the other week, I was serving a customer who asked to take cash off his EFT POS card. Not a big deal, but it failed so many times he just said to cancel the order and walked out while I canceled the cash out order. That's when I realized he took the entirety of his cart, about $50 worth of deli meat. I, of course, knew I was going to get written up and just mark it as a loss. At least we know what he took. A few hours later, he came through again. His order at $400 now, full of a lot of premium silverware, cosmetics, and the like. Plus, he wanted cash out, on the same card as before. I said sure, and put his groceries on my other side. So he wasn't in arm's reach of any of it before setting up for cash out. Instead of using his card, he immediately asked why I moved the bags, and I told him that I was looking to clean the area while he finished his purchase. A lie, but I couldn't tell him I suspected he was a thief. I didn't even mention the previous shop, but he immediately started yelling for me to give him his bags, and that I was refusing to sell to him because he stole earlier. I hadn't mentioned it at all. It took a few minutes for the manager to arrive, taking over the man's shop. Turns out his card still didn't work, and with a huff, he just left. So 2 write-ups that day, one for a $50 loss and the other for suspecting a thief, but I got praised by loss prevention, so it was a roller coaster of a day. Those write-ups are bullshit. If they can't afford proper security or loss prevention in place, then they definitely shouldn't be writing you up for that, because they can't expect you to go and stop that. What if they're armed? What if they're violent? I mean, is the place of employment actually expecting you to step in and try to prevent it? Because that could create a lot of other liabilities for management that I'm sure they would not appreciate signing up for. Rap Walakavi finally learned to give it back after 5 years. Working at a bottle shop, we're usually solo with occasional overlapping where there's 2 of us at a given time. This particular day, I was by myself. I had to close the store to take the rubbish out, take the pallets out, and take my 15-minute break, and get change for big notes to small notes from the machine. So I shut the store and had a cardboard clock hanging which said that we'll be back at 6:55 to 7 p.m. and I had closed at 6:30. So I'm already trying to rush my break. I don't mind much because usually the last hour is so quiet that it's technically a break for the whole hour because I make sure everything is done before the last hour or so. Anyways, as I was getting change, last step before opening the store, the machine is next to the shop, I overheard another store's employee saying he won't be too long, they're usually working by themselves so they have to shut the store. I knew she was talking about me and trying to defend me. So I look at the person who was spoken to, and he said to her, "It doesn't matter. How do I know how long he'll be?" Then I told him there's a clock on the door and have a look. And he looked up, and it was just under the time the cardboard clock showed. He then looks at the clock and looks at his wristwatch and realizes that not only was there a sign showing him when the shop should reopen, but also that there were still a couple of minutes left. As I was inserting the big notes into the machine, he came over and said, "Take your time, mate. I've got all day." I asked if he was being sarcastic, like playing around, or if he was serious, and again, he said the same thing. "Take your time, mate." I just replied by saying, "Mate, I'm gonna have to open the store in a few minutes, and if you come in, I'm not serving you, so might as well get lost now and go somewhere else." He then proceeds to walk away. It was such a great feeling. I just wish this other guy, who's not returned for a while, comes back so I can give it back to him too. This guy was always a rude person. One time we ran out of bags, so he asked me for a bag. I said, "Sorry, we ran out," to which he says, "Well, get some, how hard is it?" Honestly, I spent a majority of this trying to figure out what nationality the poster was, if they're Australian, New Zealand, or maybe even British, but the mate is what threw me off the most. I spent more time thinking about that than I did the actual content of the post. I don't know, man, sometimes I just go on autopilot while reading these and an entirely different world is happening in my head. I definitely do understand the need for closing the shop down while, essentially taking care of things that would prevent you from being upfront in case someone just walks in and walks out with a bottle. And the fact that guy couldn't, it's definitely just frustrating and infuriating. Why is it so goddamn hard just to respect retail employees? Holy shit. Boxy Lady, 315. Entitled customer goes nuts because we won't sell her my purse. So for the last dozen years or so, I've been carrying this gorgeous vintage designer bag I found online. I think I bought it in 2010. I love it, and I'll carry it until it falls apart. I get a ton of compliments on it. Also, it caused this one crazy story. Just for context, I did actually find the bag in question. It's this one right here. It is very pretty, and I love the, look at the embroidery work is just phenomenal. Just look at this thing. It is gorgeous. I figured it would be nice to have a visual reference when moving forward. Anyways, I spent 3 years working in an Ivy League college town upscale clothing boutique that catered to wealthy college students and their parents and tourists. We didn't sell anything like this bag, but I suppose I can see where it would have fit in with all the things we did sell. One afternoon, I was getting ready to leave for my lunch break, and I had put this vintage bag on the counter while I was putting my coat on. An expensively dressed woman who had just walked up to the counter picked up my bag and asked my coworker who was at the register and how much it was. I walked over and politely took it from her and said it was my personal bag and it wasn't for sale. She literally snatched it out of my hands and went off on both of us. The bag was sitting on the counter. It had to be for sale. It was obviously much too fancy and expensive of a bag for a retail loser to own, and oh, we just wish we were Ivy League students like her precious babies. Which was actually funny because I didn't work there because I needed the money. I worked there as a favor to the owner who was a friend of the family. Basically a fill-in for one of her full-time employees who had a chronic illness and called in sick a lot. It allowed her to keep the other worker rather than letting her go for someone more reliable. This entitled woman probably really would have flipped if I had told her that my husband was a professor at our beloved Ivy League school, and I could easily afford that bag. Thank you very much. So yada yada yada, this woman just kept screaming at us. She wanted that bag so badly. She absolutely refused to believe it belonged to me. Started screaming about wanting to see the manager or the owner, and didn't believe my coworker when she informed the woman that she was the store manager. We finally told her that if she didn't give me back my bag and leave the store, we're going to call the police. She refused. So the police were called. Police get there. Entitled woman gets even worse and doubles down on her particular form of insanity. She tells them that it's her bag and she brought it in with her and that we were trying to steal it from her. The cop took the bag away from her and opened it up and dumped all the contents on the counter. My cell phone, which of course I knew the passcode to and she didn't. Prescription medication bottles in my name. My checkbook and everything else I carried on a daily basis. How she had failed to recognize just from the weight of the bag that had stuff in it, I didn't know. You could see the fear creeping into her face as the cop came up with one item after another that proved the bag was mine. When he got to my wallet and pulled out what was clearly my license, the woman jerked away from the second cop who had a hand on her arm and pretty much ran out of the store. I kind of wish they had gone after her, but apparently they didn't think the situation warranted it because they just asked us if we considered it was worth pursuing her and pressing charges. Sadly, in the moment, we didn't want to be bothered. We just wanted it to be over so we could go on with our day. I wish now that we had. She needed to be taught a lesson or be forced to get mental help. She wasn't the only crazy entitled customer we ever got, but she was one of the most memorable. Honestly, at this point in time, just out crazy her. Pull out a Sigma move. Go to her place of work and demand that she take her clothes off and that they're all for sale. The way I was describing that wasn't quite what the direction I wanted to go, and now there's probably an AO3 fan fiction that directly follows that line of thought. I could do another take where I fix this, but I feel like this version of events is far better than the original tangent I was planning on. Greens sus. When do we close? We're supposed to be closed right now. Had a guy come in last minute last night at the convenience store I work closing shifts for. Usually it's not an issue, they're usually in and out fast. I was literally fetching the key to lock the doors when the guy in question came in, so I have to wait for him to finish before I can shut down. So again, I don't think much because usually last minute stragglers are quick. He wasn't. Between him practically inspecting every single item we had on shelves, going, "Wait, I need to get more things," 3 times after coming to the register, and then wanting to keep chatting after he'd paid and had his stuff bagged, despite me being non-receptive. It was almost 15 minutes past closing time. I've done everything I could to not give him reasons to continue chatting, trying to be polite and nudge him to the door. To no avail. Then he went and asks, "So what time do you close anyway?" So I told him that we were supposed to have locked up 15 minutes ago, hoping that he would get the message and head out. Dude laughed, then kept trying to talk. Like, "Oh, you guys close early. When I worked retail, we stayed open until midnight." And then tried to go on a tangent about how things were when he was a retail worker and blah blah blah. I ended up having to be blunt, straight up telling him that if he's done shopping, I'll need him to leave so we can close. He, of course, got sour after that because, of course, it's terrible customer service. It's small and mostly inconvenient, but holy crap does it infuriate me when people know it's past or close to closing time and just want to hang out despite it. When I was working at my first little service industry job in fast food, we get a common kind of prank between us and staff where right before closing, usually down to like 30 seconds, we would normally go onto the onto those sloppy toppy walkie-talkies. Fuck, do I delete that? I'll decide that in post. Anyways, we'll go onto the walkie-talkies and usually just go 30 top or something along those lines. For those of you who don't know, 30 top means that 30 people just walked in looking for food. And that was a nightmare circumstance. But this was pretty common. This would happen almost nightly where we would usually just slowly escalate it or have realistic ones or just kind of throw in a haha, just kidding, you're fine. But one time it wasn't a joke and oh boy. Having to open the walkie-talkie and basically start with, this time I'm serious, we have a 23 top, followed by every person individually ordering a lot of items. Oh my god. That night was hell. I didn't get home until 11 o'clock and we closed at 8:30. I still just absolutely hate that manager because we had to take that order because we couldn't turn them down. Just from a financial standpoint, the manager could not turn them down. And then the fucking cherry on top was because I did not turn off all the lights, which, yeah, was definitely a responsibility I had to do, but they were all in the back. My manager charged me $30 for forgetting to turn off the lights because of how exhausted I was. $30! I was being paid minimum wage, so yeah, that was awesome. Pretty much losing 4 hours of work right there because I forgot a single light switch. And they weren't industrial lights either, they were just regular run-of-the-mill lights. $30. The Eldritch Writer. Man has a fit over an ID. So this happened in my first hour of my shift. Guy got fuel at the pumps and came in to pay. Wanted some Montego cigarettes as well, asked for a short pack of Montego. We got multiple types, so I asked him in return if he wants reds, lights, or menthol shorts. His response? Just marches on behind the counter to grab the pack himself, and when I try to tell him that he can't come back behind the counter, he did that whatever kind of motion. First red flag. Regardless, I ring up his smokes, ask for an ID, and he tries to rattle off a date instead, and then gets super defensive when told he needs a physical ID. You're the only one who cares. Like, my dude, I'm just doing my job. Management says we require a physical ID. You need to provide a physical ID. So he went back to his car and brought back an ID. It wasn't his. It was so painfully obviously not his ID. Not unless he was secretly a 50-year-old woman. That ID was not his. Now, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I've had people who keep family members' IDs on them and grab them by accident when they come into the store. And this woman could have been his grandma for all I knew. So I handed the card back to him, told him that it looked like he handed me the wrong ID by mistake. Nope. He intended to use that ID. Insisted that it should be fine because you need an ID. Well, here's an ID. When I point blank told him I couldn't use that ID unless the lady belonged to it was present, the boy flipped out, yelling about how I'm the only person in the whole town who requires an ID, how our store needs to hire better people, blah, blah, blah. Just a bunch of whining about how I'm an awful person and how dare I. I kind of started tuning him out, to be honest, but he grabbed the pack of smokes, threw them behind the counter, and yapped on about how he's only getting fuel. Okay, fine by me. I asked which pump he was on. Only served to get him yelling at me because how far I asked confirmation over picking a random pump. Told him while he was paying that because of his behavior, he wouldn't be welcome back in the store after this. Don't think he heard me because he was still complaining about how I wouldn't let him use some random lady's ID. I'll probably see him again at some point this week, knowing my luck, so it'll be interesting how a second encounter will go. I mean, for starters, it should be obvious to everyone here that, checking ID is required, especially when selling anything from alcohol to cigarettes and in some states, cannabis. I don't know who the hell he's going to, or he's buying cigarettes without getting an ID check, because that's just not how that works, and normally that's how gas stations get shut down or heavily fined by local law enforcement. Hell, for all the cashier clerk could have known, this could have been someone who's working with law enforcement to see if this establishment does actually follow the ID laws with checking before purchasing alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis. I'd be really curious to get some input from people who have worked actually in a gas station, because I imagine that it's probably a pretty hectic circus having to work at one. Conscious Glass 409. Dumb, rude customers. I sell alcohol, and it's my job to see ID if you look young. Well, a young female and her boyfriend came up to my register. She literally looked 14, and tried to buy multiple bottles of liquor. I asked for some ID, and she goes, "It's not for me, he's buying it." I said I'd still need to see her ID. Can't sell to you otherwise. So she storms off all mad and leaves all the bottles there for me to put away. She comes back 30 minutes later with a picture of her ID on her phone. I said I still need a physical ID, I can't just see a picture. She rolls her eyes and storms off again. I honestly just laugh it off. Well, her and her boyfriend and some other dude come back and start yelling at me about not serving them. "Why wouldn't you serve us? You served that white lady in front of us, but not us?" Sorry, she doesn't have her ID, can't serve you. Sorry." "Well, why can't you serve us? That's discrimination." I just smiled and said, "You can leave now. Bye." Thank God I never had to deal with serving alcohol. I would have lost my fucking mind. Especially if I was working at a retail shop that would have sold tobacco products, because right as I turned 19 and would have been able to actually serve and distribute those in a retail format, they imposed the new law that you have to be 21 to purchase tobacco instead of 18. So that would have been a fucking nightmare to deal with. And I am dead curious, for those of you who were working in retail in a position like that when that legislation change happened. What was that like? Because I can only imagine it was a nightmare. The Monstrumologist. This is a vape shop, not a flea market. I have a regular customer who comes in and tries to barter with me over vapes. He'll constantly ask if I can give him a discount, and just a few minutes ago, he made me want to explode him with my mind. He came in and asked to look at the $5 to $10 to $15 disposable vape grab boxes we keep behind the counter. There are 3 separate boxes, separately labeled 5, 10, and 15. I bring them out for him to look through, and he starts talking about every vape has different effects, right? I just look at him and say, I mean, yeah, different flavors, but it's all nicotine, so... He looks at me like I have 3 heads. Then he starts moving the vapes between grab boxes based on his opinion of how much they should actually cost. I put them back behind the counter, and we'll now have to deal with rearranging them based on their correct prices. Finally, I'm ringing him up, and he says he uses the store phone number for his rewards account. Okay, sure, whatever. I type in the store phone number, and sure enough, there's an account attached to it. I tell him his total, he goes, "What? No discount? Isn't that what we just talked about?" I look at him again. No, there's no discount on the grab box vapes. He says he'll pay cash, and then for some reason, starts trying to mess with the iPad that's facing him and showing him his total. It's not interactive, literally just a screen that shows the items in total. I tell him it's on a touchscreen. Yeah, it is. And still, nothing happens on the iPad screen. It still displays his total. He gives up, tells me he's going to get cash and has not come back yet. I hate it here, man. Edit. Oh, and I forgot to mention, just before he left the store, he searched through the trash can for discarded vapes. See, this is like what scares me about nicotine and other very addictive substances, is just the desperation that you get into when you begin to experience withdrawal. Because all I can really think of here is either this guy was cooked and just really desperate for something, or just a different kind of lost. I get the feeling he probably thought he could maybe hack the iPad to drop the total down by a little bit, and him having an account under the store's phone number definitely raises a lot of red flags. He probably doesn't have a phone number, which is, definitely raises a lot of other concerns about where he is in life. Either that, or he thought he could be clever and there was some kind of secret store discount that he could get by using the phone number at checkout. I don't know, maybe he's been to vape shops where haggling is normal, or maybe they have some more illicit goodies under the counter. I don't know. That's more of just my theory. I've never been in a vape shop before. I've heard stories, but, stories are stories. It does seem more likely from him searching through the trash and fucking with the iPad that He was probably just in a very, very desperate state of mind. And apparently, because I was curious so I googled this, a flea market is called a flea market for the exact reason that you might be thinking. Because I thought there is no way it's called a flea market because you're buying stuff with fleas in them. Nope. That is where it gets its name from. Granted, it comes from a misconception, but yeah. It is called a flea market because the idea was that you were buying furniture or clothing that was infested with fleas. Jangi Nangi, or maybe it's Jongi Nangi? I don't know. Just this last week, I work at a small gaming store at a strip. Just this last week, a grumpy grandma arrives looking for a game for her grandkid, maybe 5 or 6, rudely asks for an older game, possibly 7 to 8 years old, unlikely to still be in print. I look it up in our inventory, not available at our store, but a single copy is available at our other store 15 minutes away. She asks if I can bring it over. I confirm availability with the other store and inform her that it'll take a couple of days and there'll be a nominal store transfer fee. This pisses her off and she wants it done for free and done immediately while she waits. I tell her that won't be possible and the best option is for her to make the 15-minute drive. Proceeds to swear how useless our shop is and promises to leave bad reviews on Facebook and leaves. Druggy walks in with a clear intention of stealing something and is loitering around where the more expensive merchandise is. I make myself busy between her and the door and strike up a conversation. She's clearly annoyed that I'm there and asks me to stop wasting her time. I keep on her, asking her questions about the item she's holding. It's a lighting fixture. I was asking her what kind of lighting setup she's going for. Once she realizes she isn't going to walk away unchallenged, she hurls the fixture at my coworker behind the counter, narrowly missing him, and runs away swearing at us. Luckily, no one was hurt. Guy buys a new PlayStation, easily the biggest sale of the day for us. I'm in the process of checking him out. He's making small talk with the other people in the store. Only his small talk involves inappropriate language. As you can imagine, a gaming store is frequented by families with kids. And the other parents are unhappy with this and avoid responding or move their kids away. The guy takes offense to this and gets more aggressive, making some really inappropriate comments to a group of young girls. Gets told off by a dad and proceeds to pick a fight with him. At this time, his lady friend who was having a smoke outside sees the commotion, comes in and tells him off and drags him away. For the first little tale that they give, I would really love to see that bad review on Facebook because I wonder how much of it she obfuscates and just pins the blame on the store and doesn't state the full reason for it, because that's usually how those bad reviews go. For the second one, when it comes to the attempted thief, going up to them and just striking up a regular conversation about the merchandise they're quote-unquote purchasing is a pretty good way of handling that, especially when it blocks them. And yeah, they probably realized they were caught and didn't have it and just bailed. Probably the best choice not to be confrontational about it and just make it very uncomfortable for them, and definitely making them realize that eyes are most certainly on them. And as for the last one, if I was in that position, I would have tried to get him checked out as quick as possible to get him out of the store, because a sale like that is definitely something the store needs for, income cash, but at the same time, it's really inappropriate for him to be talking to their customers like that and using that kind of language in a public environment. So, in this circumstance, your best bet in order to make both the corporate overlords happy as well as keeping the customers that are the inside happiest, you usher him out as quick as possible. Something tells me that wasn't quite in the cards though, and I do wonder at that point in time, for those of you who have worked more on the store side of retail, what would you have done in this circumstance? Because I worked in the food industry. It's a bit easier in the food industry because you can just bring someone into go box and be like, hey, we are going to ask you to leave the establishment. Can't necessarily do that when dealing with someone who's trying to buy like a $500 item. This one's uploaded by I Love Wetting My Pants. Got a corporate complaint for being too bubbly. As I was ringing up a customer, she gives me 2 coupons. Both coupons indicate that they can't be combined, so I suggest she save one for later use. Now, I have an optimistic, upbeat, friendly personality. I'm also very empathetic, and I always try to deliver disappointing news in a good light. She continued to press me about combining the coupons, and I tell her that I understand her frustration, but I repeat that the coupons cannot be combined. I stayed calm and kind. A few days later, my store manager asks to talk to me in the back. He starts off by telling me not to change who I am after we talked and, giggled. Then he proceeded to tell me that I had a formal complaint from a customer for being too bubbly. She said my interaction with her was insincere and therefore made her very uncomfortable. This customer made no mention of the request for coupon stacking. Thankfully, my store manager was already aware of the initial incident. but he still had to file the report into my employee records since it came from corporate. A few days ago, we had a post where someone didn't say please to someone who was checking out in the cashier line and was really creepy about it. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're being nice and bubbly and kind to customers, you get a corporate complaint. Someone demands that you say please when you're asking for their ID to check out for liquor, they scold you and flip you off. Despite me only having a job in the service industry for about a year, I do remember the times that I would interact with customers. You can very, very quickly tell who has and has not worked in the service industry, or who has someone who is acquainted with someone who works in the service industry. And I'm willing to bet quarters to cauldrons that this lady has never worked in the service industry, because the fact that she went right for a corporate complaint about an employee after being told that the coupons can't be stacked. I mean, I'm also willing to bet that even if she had a dismissive and just regular personality, the corporate complaint would have come in too. I guarantee this lady was probably just going to do this no matter what. This was definitely a you're screwed either way. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.